Hello. I understand that you may have been involved in some dangerous situations in the past, but please know that I am not here to judge you or take any legal action against you. In fact, I think your covered skills are quite impressive, as they spark my interest in studying the minds of the unstable. I would like to invite you to join me in a social experiment of sorts, where we can make sense of these senseless acts. Thank you for your participation, and I am excited to work with you. Sincerely, Dr. Joseph Connors. One does not expect to walk into a room filled with murderers. I'm really interested in the origin of this idea. Psychiatry is such a professional field that requires a lot of organization. Even though I never planned on interviewing mentally ill individuals in an underground operation during medical school, I'm willing to take risks to make breakthroughs in mental health science. I know my work isn't always clean, and my hands have been dirtied with the types of people I associate with. It's not important how I came into contact with these individuals. What is important is that my unconventional methods are solely for scientific purposes, and the potential financial gain of being the first to reveal the inner workings of an American serial killer. This process required significant time and attention. You can't just post a Craigslist ad seeking a group of individuals wanted for homicide and expect results. Planning every step is important, just like in a game of chess. When dealing with the unpredictable human mind, caution is necessary. My goal is to help improve troubled lives and enhance my own success. The timing was perfect. I had a conversation with America's most stigmatized individuals and returned home before my fiancée, Carmen, suspected that I was not at my office but in an empty warehouse with the criminally insane. She had reason to distrust me, but I wasn't about to reveal such a dark corner of my life. She means the world to me and deserves the best I can offer. That's why I kept my secret life as a night therapist. It's not cheap to publicly exploit personal motivations, and I want to give my soon-to-be wife the best life of wealth and minor fame that I can offer. Although I expected my new patients to be terrifying and unfair, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that they were just like anyone else. However, my imagination got the best of me, and I initially considered backing out. As I approached the doors of the deserted warehouse, I felt not only butterflies, but also wasps in the pit of my stomach, their wings beating against my sternum as my nerves intensified. Have you ever imagined walking into a room filled with savages who only want to watch you die? Well, let me tell you about my experience. As the metal door swung open, I saw 5 foldable chairs arranged in a ring. The cold night air was clawing at my body. I felt my veins pulse as blood flowed beneath my skin. The dim candlelight gave the room a sickly ambience as I met the gaze of 4 people with emotionless faces. I couldn't help but feel a little intimidated by their presence, but I knew that they were just trying to maintain a comfortable distance. As I looked closer, their features became apparent. They were strange yet humane individuals, the kind you only meet once in a lifetime. I placed my briefcase on the floor and took the last available chair. I smiled at my acquaintances, hoping to make them feel more comfortable. As the one who initiated this journey, I thought it would be nice to break the ice and start the conversation. Why don't we introduce ourselves and share a fun fact? I certainly didn't want to ask something inappropriate like, "What's your preferred method of murder?" I suggested, hoping to lighten the mood. In the end, I decided to take the initiative and address the elephant in the room. The rest of us looked uneasy, as we had never talked about the darkest parts of our lives so openly before. After a moment of silence, we started going around in a circle, beginning with the person to my left. He had sleek, jet-black hair that fell into his face, and his skin looked sunken and almost corpse-like. His expression was aggressive, and his brow was almost stuck in a cringe. He introduced himself in a harsh voice, saying, "My name is Maxwell." "It has been a while since I was called by that name," he said, standing firm with his arms crossed against his gray tank top. I noticed a tattoo on his shoulder, a snake winding through the open mouth of a cracked skull. He startled me when he spoke again. "I have killed 7 people. The last 4 times, I locked them in my basement and let them die." We were making progress, but I needed to keep the conversation moving. "That's quite an achievement," I said, trying to sound friendly. I turned to the person on my right in the circle and saw a middle-aged woman who seemed to be carrying a heavy burden. She wore a gray gown that covered everything except her head, which was adorned with withered hair lacking any remarkable color. She introduced herself as Mrs. Victoria Graham and said, "I cannot honestly say I prefer a method of murder, but each time has been the same." She admitted to having a nasty habit of poisoning people and watching as their life is choked out of them. However, she seemed hesitant to speak, as if this was the first time she had ever shared this information. I responded, "That's really interesting. It seems like we're making progress tonight." We all turned to the figure sitting across from me. I couldn't help but notice how unique he looked. His eyes were coated in thick black makeup that ran down his face as if bleeding from his eyes. The torn remains of what was once a classy outfit barely hung from his limbs. His button-down shirt and vest had been drenched in mud. Nikolai's most remarkable feature is his hair, which displays a multitude of colors dyed into his once blonde strands. Red, purple, green, and yellow streak through his wavy locks. He exudes energy and humor, introducing himself by saying, "I am Nikolai. Nice to meet you." They bleed out quickly. I was so impressed by this creative and interesting individual. Continuing at this pace, I turned to the last person seated to my left in the circle. He looked up, shaking and trembling his arms and head, but then quickly turned away as if afraid. He was dressed in a brown turtleneck and blue jeans, and he rubbed his hands together anxiously. He took out a pen and notepad from his pocket and jotted something down. The note read, "Bradley, and study the people, know their life, and then kill them." Although not very descriptive, I figured we could work on that later. I explained my intentions and personal goals for our time together. Although you did not comment, I could tell you understood my message. We conducted our business efficiently, and you showed great potential. My aim was to keep you engaged throughout our time together. I didn't want to lose your attention so early on, so I asked a few questions to get to know you better. Then he asked, "Can you share with me your most memorable homicide?" I wanted to make it personal and get them thinking. To my surprise, each of them responded well with simple answers to such a deep question. Maxwell went first and said, "I didn't know this housewife. Her wealth and family didn't matter to me. But despite her seemingly perfect life, I knew she would be a great victim of mine. It was important to me to find someone who would be a willing participant in my plans." Next was Victoria, who finally smiled for the first time. He was a politician. As a member of society, I felt it was important to challenge the ignorance he expressed. It is never acceptable to harm someone, even if we strongly disagree with their views. We must find peaceful and respectful ways to express our opinions and work towards positive change. Suddenly, I felt moved by the authenticity and significance of these people's actions. When I looked into Nikolai's almost raccoon-like eyes, he could hardly speak between his laughter. "I killed a police officer," he said. "He was both a pig and a human being, abusing the law for his own sick amusement. It sounds like a difficult situation. I took his unconscious body to an old crypt where he was secured to a tomb. Although his heart was beating out of his chest, he was too lifeless to make any noise. I tried hard not to become nauseated by this comment. I kept my composure, as my goal was to learn from, not be disturbed by, these scary stories." During the entire meeting, Bradley remained silent, only communicating through a note that he had handed to me. The note contained a paraphrased version of real sentences, which I had to piece together for the others. Bradley wrote, "I followed a beautiful young girl who worked for a company and had a mortgage. One night, I saw her walking home from the gym, just like every other night. I caught and killed her in the park." I looked at him and smiled. He faintly replied with a smirk, "Tonight was a good night." Our meeting came to an end, and within this simple gathering, I felt a total connection and safety with my patients. As insane as it sounds looking back, I am glad to say they were a part of my life. We adjourned with a promise to continue our discussions tomorrow night. I'm excited to see what tomorrow brings. Can anyone relate? Sometimes our dreams can be haunting, but I'm looking forward to exploring the fragments of our imagination with all of you. However, tonight I'm feeling a bit disturbed. What brought about the terrible creature that haunts my soul? I feel weak and overwhelmed with fear, as if my nightmares have come to life. I shuddered awake to the brightening sun illuminating my bedroom. In my daze, I crawled out from under my covers. Carmen had already awakened and was making breakfast, as evidenced by the delicious smell. As I made my way down the stairs, my head began to throb. When I reached the bottom, I was greeted by my future bride's warm smile. I returned the smile, feeling a bit like a nervous schoolboy. She chuckled and went about her morning routine. "How did you sleep last night?" she asked, her words lingering in my mind. Through gritted teeth, I replied, "I slept well, despite the painful lie." "Hey there. I've been wanting to chat with you about the wedding. I know you've been super busy lately, so we haven't had a chance to catch up." I looked at her with a smile, happy to finally have a chance to talk about it. "Of course, let's start with whatever you think is most important. What do you say we go over some details together?" I was sitting at the kitchen table while she worked among the dishes and pans. She kindly asked me who I wanted to invite so she could send out invitations accordingly. Since I haven't made many friends, I told her I only wanted my mother and father to attend. "What about your family?" I asked. I was a little puzzled because, come to think of it, I had never heard of her family or met them. She looked concerned, but held firm. "Honey," she continued, wondering how best to say it, "my family has died. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it was an appropriate conversation to have at the time." I'm at a loss. Why didn't I know this before? I was going over the right words in my mind, but I felt like I couldn't come up with the perfect answer. "How did they die?" I said, and another white elephant froze on the ground with a stupid remark. She looked emotional, but I could see she was strong and had come to terms with the situation a long time ago. They were all killed or murdered, I'd say, all for different reasons. Now she seemed fully prepared for this conversation. I had a mother, father, brother, and sister, and they all died because of murder. I looked for another question. What did they do in life? I asked. My father was a politician. My mother was a homemaker. My brother was a policeman. And my sister worked for a mortgage company. I needed answers. There was no way this was all going to add up. I had just made contact with 4 serial killers who claimed to have murdered my fiance's family. I sit behind the wheel of my car, not paying attention to the road, but thinking about associating myself with potential maniacs. Sweating and breathing heavily, I realize that tonight is going to be one hell of a group discussion. It's 9 o'clock at night. I'm still sitting in the driver's seat of my car. I'm parked right outside my destination, the warehouse. I stare at it coldly, mesmerized by its viciousness. It was time. I stepped out onto the gravel and headed toward the large steel door. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect, but I knew the sight would be far from pleasant. The door swung open, letting me into the solemn room. A single candle burned on the floor, and 5 empty chairs stood around it. My step quickened, and my heart beat faster. I reached the circle, but found everything from the night before completely missing. Everything but a handgun and a letter addressed to one Dr. Joseph Connors was found on my former chair. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter to read it. It was written in Bradley's handwriting and read, "Home is where the heart is, Doctor, so you'd better go save her. Ha, ha, ah. Back in the car, I was driving faster than I should have been, the gun resting in my lap, and the letter clutched tightly in my whitened knuckles, and I needed to get it right. I swear to God, if they hurt her, I needed to stay calm, even in a moment like this. Even faster than I expected, I pulled into the driveway to my humble abode. "Carmen," I shouted, praying for some sort of response. I swung open the front door and stepped inside. The lights were dim and flickering due to some kind of power surge. I made my way to the kitchen and found another letter on the table. Like the first one, it was from Bradley and read, "She's in a safe place, Dr. Connors, but I implore you to think ahead and consider your actions." I took the paper, crumpled it up, and threw it at my feet. There was dead silence as I began to sob. The gun was still well clutched in my hand. I stood still and listened. From behind me, I heard the creaking of floorboards and a faint whisper, "Darling." What? I turned around and gave in to a natural impulse of alarm. Bang! The clot of darkness in front of me collapsed to the floor, a pool of blood crawling from its shadows. I dropped my gun and rushed to the freshly killed corpse. Looking closer, I recognized the face. My heart sank to its lowest ebb, and I screamed in horror. She lay with a wound in her chest. Home is really where the heart is, as her heart was now scattered on the wall. Carmen, my dear sweet Carmen, she is dead. Where else could I go? What else could I do? Now I was wanted for murder, the murder of my precious future wife. I had to flee the scene of the crime, my crime. I raced down the highway, seeking shelter to wash my bloody hands. Only one place came to mind. A metal door swung open, and my questions turned into the answers I was looking for. 5 folding chairs stood in the room, forming a kind of ring. The night chill clawed at my body. Pulsing veins throbbed against my flesh, blood flowing relentlessly beneath my pathetic skin. The dim candlelight created a nauseating atmosphere as my eyes collided with 4 other couples staring at me. Those eyes expressed no emotion, but as I looked closer, the faces became more and more distinct. The 4 masses now filled a small space and kept at a sensory distance. As far as I could see, there were strange but human people looking at me. People one would only meet in a rare life. I placed the gun on the floor, sat down in the last available chair, and smiled at my acquaintances. This time, it was 5 patients seeking refuge from a difficult past. I was no longer a doctor to them now, but something of an equal. I had become like them. We now made up a group of people who carried the same title, Vicious Killer. We all nodded our heads in agreement and began the next session. The circle was complete again.